So Mossy Creek started, or was first inhabited by the Cherokee Indians, and the Cherokee Native Americans stayed here and were along Mossy Creek and had a small little settlement there where the creek bed. And the reason why was because to the Native American people, the water was so important because of what they could use it for cleaning and for cooking and everything else. The first settlers that came into this area was a man by the name of Adam and Elizabeth Peck. Adam Peck settled on Mossy Creek, just along the creek, further down near where Lisa's Country Kitchen is. But he had received some of the land from Mossy Creek as a reward for serving in the American Revolution. He found an old blockhouse that had been set up by settlers, but that never stayed, and he kind of used that, and then he built a community there, like we said, towards where Lisa's Country Kitchen is, along Mossy Creek. After a while, the Pecks settled in that area between what we now would know as Newmarket and Jefferson City, but other settlers came into the area. It was about the early 1800s where we first received, where this area first started to see some prominent industry from things like lumber mills, and then the Haynes Ironworks was the first real building. Now that what is thought to be the remains of, or where it was is along Mossy Creek, and it is on the Carson Newman property. The Haynes Ironworks was a building that was not really like a heavy ironworks as we would know it today, but it was an ironworks that was used to work on horseshoes and things like that. And they would use the water power of the creek to kind of help propel the forge. It was also a big enough building that they could have town meetings there, or meetings of substance there, and it also doubled as the town post office. So it was the early 1800s where Mossy Creek would first receive its first post office and be able to use that post office as a way of people receiving mail. So people that lived in this community finally felt like they had a community. It was in the 1830s and other industries that would come through, like because of everything as far as crop grow was very good because of the water and because of being between two rivers. The crops in this area were outstanding, and livestock was raised, and it was there that they would do some wool carding or making of wool. They had a gun works that were there where they would make ammunition, and they also had a prominent mill that is on the bend of the creek. It is where there was a waterfall. Now, early Mossy Creek was known to have several waterfalls. About every 400 feet, there would be a waterfall of 6 feet or so, which was great for industry, because what you would have is you could put water wheels along the creek, and you could power lumber mills, you could power ironworks, you could power a lot of different things that you would definitely want to have. And so this community grew because of the water power, because the creek flew by at a substantial rate, and they were able to have that creek as part of their power. It was there that they discovered in the 1850s that zinc was discovered. And zinc was an important material in that time because it was what you would mix with copper to make brass, basically. And so zinc was important, and it was one of the richest zinc deposits in the United States. And they had zinc there. The problem was that they couldn't get to it easy without the use of electronic tools that were way away from being created and invented. They really had to just get the surface zinc or the oxidized zinc. After they would get the oxidized zinc, they could use that to make what they would call a zinc flour. So the zinc industry started to appear during the creek, along the creek too. Another important building, especially for the history of Carson Newman, was the Mossy Creek Baptist Church. Now, it's also on Carson Newman property. And the Mossy Creek Baptist Church was brought in, or came, and when the college was first created in 1851, it was where the college students first met along Mossy Creek. It was later in 1853 that the church said that it was disrupting the business of the church, and so they decided then that they would now form what they would call its own college away from the Baptist church. And so it had changed from Mossy Creek Missionary Baptist College to just Mossy Creek Baptist College. And so Mossy Creek Baptist College was then created and put up on the hill where the Kent Sparks building is and where the flagpole is and where the football stadium is. This is where the First Baptist College was, the Mossy Creek Baptist College. The college met successfully and started to grow, but in 1861, after growing tensions for the American Civil War came, the American Civil War hit home, and in 1862, the college ceased to have classes as we know it. And so all the students, most of the students that went to the university at that time decided which side they would go fight for and went off and fight for war. In East Tennessee, which was prominently Union and pro to the American federal government, a lot of the people in this area were in support of the Union. Unfortunately for them, the Confederacy took over this area and decided that they were going to push into Jefferson City or Mossy Creek, and it was occupied by the Confederacy. It wasn't until 1863, when in the summer of 1863, Colonel Sanders and his raid came through and pushed into this area, that the Union people felt like they had hope. And then in December of 1863, finally Union troops moved into this area and occupied the town. One of the places they stayed was at the college. But on December 29th, in 1863, the Battle of Mossy Creek was fought on the Carson Newman campus and in the surrounding area around Mossy Creek. Here, soldiers from Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Tennessee, Ohio, Pennsylvania fought for the Union side against soldiers from Arkansas and Georgia and Alabama and Texas and Tennessee and Georgia. Like we said, Georgia. They fought in the Battle of Mossy Creek. It was a battle against two sets of skilled troops. Here, a young artillery captain named Eli Lilly would distinguish himself as he held off the Confederate attack. And Eli Lilly would go on further to be the founder of the Lilly Corporation, which is one of the world's biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Here, also men like William Jackson Palmer, a later Congressional Medal of Honor winner, and about 5 to 10 others who would later win the Congressional Medal of Honor, would fight in this battle and determine the victory. Although it was a close battle, at the end of the day, the Union prevailed as reinforcements came back from Dandridge and crossed the bridge of the old creek and decided that they would pitch in and help and push the Confederates back. Mossy Creek in 1870 was the between 11 and 15 as far as unincorporated or biggest cities in the state of Tennessee at that time, although it was unincorporated. And it continued to grow with industry along the creek, especially with the zinc. But as industry changed and water power wasn't as essential, and roadways became more and more important, Mossy Creek lost its relevance. And it was then that in the 1870s that the town, which is now through the 1890s and 1900s, the old town of Jefferson City is where the town was most prominent. And it was there that the college moved and eventually moved over to where its current location is. And in 1900, Mossy Creek became Jefferson City, an incorporated town, and was an important seat in the county of Jefferson County for the state of Tennessee. Does that help?
Oh yeah, that was really good.
All right.
I'm going to tell you could take some breaks if you wanted to.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. That gives you everything, and that should be 4 minutes, right? Was that 4 minutes?
I can see if I can look back and see.
That should give you some clips if you want to. And that's just kind of a short history from 1790s to 1900.
Yeah.
So if you're going to film some things down at the creek, if you go down below the stadium,
Mm-hmm.
and you go down below behind the baseball field, on the creek is what's left of the old bridge. It's still there. There's 2 concrete things that if you go down, so if you go on that pathway, if you go directly down from the Ken Sparks building, and you go down there, you'll see 2, on one side of the creek, there's cement on one side, and the other is the other. That's what's left of the old bridge that dates back to that time.
Okay.
And that's what I was talking about. And then if you walk further down the creek, you'll see this like concrete rock crusher that's sticking out of the ground. It's got bars sticking out of the ground. To the right of that is the iron. If you're standing with your back to the creek, to the right is the Ironworks, and to the left is where the old church was.
Okay, I'll try to get
some shots.
Yeah,
that would be some of those things that you can get.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, if I get some like, I'm gonna move the camera over there, but like you keep your eyesight right here.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna ask you like, what makes Mossy Creek unique from?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
let me see if I can just close long enough. But yeah, that should definitely be for a minute. If not, that's why I would space it out and then have some pauses and stuff.
Especially with any questions you ask, definitely we'll get that.
Do you have anywhere you need to be?
I got to go somewhere. I got practice a little bit, but
I just don't want to hold you up too long.
Sure. I got to watch Trey Zell throw the javelin a little bit. So.
My boy.
Yeah.
My boy, fresh out of football.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess you can just keep it on like off-site, like over here. Maybe something like this.